Hi, I'm Beth, and this is Identity Shift. Welcome back. This is episode 4 of my grief series, and today I'm going to talk about establishing. If you think about your grief as a house, and imagine that the situation has happened and there's been an earthquake in the house, and now the building is compromised. So establishing is the process of going through and identifying what is still viable and what needs to be replaced or removed. In my case, my grief kind of felt like the whole building was flattened and I needed to just clear it off the foundation and start again from scratch. And there were a lot of areas in my life that changed significantly as I was ready. If I look back now, because it's been 11 years, I can see some significant changes and some minor changes that were probably really needed. As you recover from the worst of the emotions, the most intense part of grief, you start to need to establish who you are now and who you are becoming as you process through. Any situation of grief evolves into a change, and there's always going to be change happening in life anyway, but loss brings a greater, more significant change. It means that you have to renegotiate who you are, what matters to you, and how you present yourself to yourself and to the world, how you show up. And for me, there were several significant changes I made. In the last episode, I talked about editing social media, editing relationships, and some relationships continued to drift apart. And this wasn't as painful and upsetting a process as I was worried it would be. It became more like a natural process. We just didn't have things in common anymore. And it was okay for us not to see each other as often because I was also making new friends and new connections as I found other things that interested me. And so it became more of an organic process of becoming. I changed some of the clothes that I wore and the things that I liked. And when I look back at pictures of myself 15 years ago when I was married, I'm amazed at some of the things I chose and thought looked nice on me because now I have a totally different style. So changing my hair, changing my glasses, and changing my clothes was a simple thing that I could do that would actually make me feel better about myself, and it also presented me differently to the world. Another thing that I actually changed church community. And this was a significant change because my husband and I had gone together to the church that we were in, and everybody in the church knew us both well. So they were all grieving as well. And part of the reason why I changed churches was so that I could have a place to heal and be safe and not have to worry about everybody else's feelings or remind them of how uncomfortable they were with how I was processing what had happened. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. Ephesians 3:16-18, New International Version. The next piece of establishing for me was to honor the memory of my husband and also try to bring closure to some of the turmoil that I had been feeling as I had started to grieve him. Now, my husband's death was very sudden, and so it was quite traumatic. And the last few weeks of his life really shadowed for me the good memories and the positive things. So for me to recapture that, it actually took me a very long time. And I wasn't really able to remember all of the good times. I was so overcome with just those last couple of weeks of his life. But doing something intentional that honors that time period in your life that has now ended is actually a really important piece of grief. I learned this from Joyce Rupp, who wrote a book called Praying Our Goodbyes. And although I didn't know about this until about 2 years ago, it was a really meaningful process for me just to sit and write a letter to my husband. And then I buried it in the backyard. And it was also a really meaningful thing for me to have a memento that represented my grief. So I have this little angel, which my mother found and gave to me. It's a willow tree angel. You've probably seen these before. This one is the angel of hope, sharing the light of hope and courage. So this is not a gift that my husband gave me. It was a representation that there's hope, there's light in the middle of the darkness. And this simple angel has just been sitting on my bookshelf the whole time that I have been grieving. And she is a reminder to me that there's light at the end of the tunnel and there's hope in the journey. It's really good to have something significant like that. It helps you in a way to bring closure to things and also to bring honor. And the last thing that I really needed to negotiate in establishing myself was really understanding who God was for me now. I had experienced God being very close to me in the moments of my early grief when I was so overwhelmed with emotion. And now that I was starting to be more functional again, I'll use that word, I needed to know who is God for me now and who do I want to be with him? Who do I want to be with him? It was really important for me to understand that. And it took me a really long time to unpack it. And I also think that's always a moving thing because we are changing and growing constantly. But God never changes. And there's often going to be times when you feel like you're angry at God. Why did this happen to me? Why did you do this to me? And God can handle those kinds of questions. He's not scared off by our anger and frustration. But it's also really important to come to the place of understanding how faithful God is to us in these times and seasons of trial. I'm just going to pray for you now. Lord, I thank you for each person watching who's in this journey of grief. And as they establish their foundations again after being shaken, I pray that you would show them the key pieces that they need in order to bring stability to who they are. And I also pray that you would bring them to a place where they can do something concrete and specific to honor what they have lost or who they have lost. I bless you today with peace, with rest, and with joy. And I'll see you next time.